All right, picture this. You're stuck on a problem, you're banging your head against a wall, staring at the same code, design, or blueprint for hours. Nothing's clicking. Now, imagine someone hands you a rubber duck and says, explain it to this little guy. You laugh at first, but then it actually works. Turns out talking to a rubber duck might be one of the simplest but most powerful problem-solving tools out there. Today we're going to be diving into how something as quirky as the Rubber Duck Method became a key inspiration for my latest children's book, The Engineer's Duck, and why a little duck can hold the secret to your next big breakthrough.
This is the Engineering IRL podcast, a place for engineers in the real world. We try to break down engineering concepts and figure out how to apply them to real life. Let's become better problem solvers, better engineers. This is your host, Andrew Sario. Let's begin.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Engineering IRL podcast for engineeringinreallife.com. It's been a while, almost 2 years since our last episode, so first off, thanks for sticking around. Now, episode 50, what a milestone, right? I couldn't think of a better way to celebrate than diving into a concept that's actually inspired something very near and dear to me, which is my new children's book, The Engineer's Duck, and it's part of an 8-book series with book 1 coming out at the end of the year, which will be called World of Engineering, and the whole idea is that sets up the whole universe, and then it relates to each of those books, and it'll go through all these adventures and things like that. But more on that a little bit later. So you're probably wondering, why the Rubber Duck Method? What does a rubber duck have to do with engineering, and why name a children's book after it? We'll get to all of that, but the idea behind this episode is to explore how such a simple technique can be a game changer in problem solving, no matter if you're just starting in engineering or have been at it for years. Especially if you haven't heard about this, I'd be surprised, but in fairness, more of our software friends would probably be familiar, and for the other disciplines, maybe less so, but let's see. I'll also talk a bit about the book, how this problem solving method was a big influence on its title, and why I think it's such a fun and accessible concept for kids. After all, problem solving is a life skill as much as it is a technical one. And wouldn't it be great if the next generation started picking up those skills early, right? All right, so let's get into it. The Rubber Duck Engineering Method, also called Rubber Duck Debugging in programming, and there's slightly other variations of the name, but it's all the same thing, is a problem solving technique that engineers and developers use to work through complex problems. Here's how it works. So you explain your problem out loud to an inanimate object, like a rubber duck, as if you're teaching it. And the fact that it's a rubber duck is actually a little bit of a meme. You can technically do this on other objects, but it's an ongoing meme, and you might find on a developer's desk or something like that a toy rubber duck. Anyway, so it might sound silly, right? I've just said that talk to it as if you're teaching it, but as you talk through each detail, you start to see things more clearly. Maybe a step you thought was right has a flaw, or maybe there's a pattern that you missed. And by breaking it down like this, you can often find the solution without anyone else needing to weigh in. And so I should also explain that it's not just like explaining the problem. What you might also do is explain how this thing is meant to work. So you go through this process and say, this is what should be happening, not just describing the symptoms of the problem. Obviously, it's open. You can kind of do a little bit of both, but I find the effectiveness comes from explaining how it should work first, and then going from there. And the other part of it is the fact that it's a rubber duck or an inanimate object is you require a certain level of explaining because you can't assume it knows anything to start with, right? So you have to dumb it down to a certain level. Now, this idea of explaining something simply, essentially teaching it, turns out to be a powerful way to gain insight. So, in fact, even outside of engineering, studies show that teaching helps reinforce our own understanding. I wrote a short article on this, and also how it's used for motivation and things like that as well. So if you're feeling a bit flat in your career or your inspiration for engineering or your passion, sometimes teaching it is actually a smart thing that you can do. Okay. Now, for kids, well, if they start thinking through problems and explaining solutions early, it's amazing how fast they can develop those same critical thinking skills. So just learning the process of how do I describe the thing that's happening versus keeping it in and just having that emotion or that feeling of frustration. Now, here's where it all ties in with the engineer's duck. So I've always thought this concept was something worth passing down, especially to the kids, and especially now that I'm a parent and have a kid of my own. And it's actually one reason behind the name of my book. So that's, a duck is cute. Well, the other part of the reasoning is it's one of those few animals that kind of exist land, sea, and air. So especially with engineering being multifaceted, it's going to have that flexibility. But now back to the kind of debugging method. So the idea isn't that kids need to start debugging their toys, although maybe one day they can go and fix it, but that they start to see how breaking down a problem or explaining it out can help, like just saying it out loud, right? And they get to see that problems aren't these big scary things, they're just puzzles that can be broken down and solved, right? And that's a mindset that we can teach early and it sticks, right? That's just like you build it in from as early as possible, and you just think that way from the get-go. Now, in the engineer's duck are little engineer characters. So in this case, we've got Engineer Lonlon, who's actually who you can see on the screen right now. He's on these adventure and learning about engineering and things like that. And he's got a duck sidekick whose name is Ted E. You can guess at why Ted E is named Ted E, but I'll give you a clue, is that TED is actually an acronym, which all us engineers know far too many industries with far too many acronyms that are forced into names. So it's kind of like a little Easter egg there. There's plenty of Easter eggs in the book. I'm like that. But they face small challenges and figure things out by trying and explaining and learning from the mistakes. They're also just kind of going around and saying like, hey, this is a thing that's built and this is why. And in some cases, hey, there's this thing that someone wants to do, and so we'll go and build this in order to solve that. It's designed to be fun and a little silly. So when it comes to certain like aspects of the book, we'll sneak in these concepts. So it's not going to be a blatant like, hey, this is how you go and solve problems. It's just going to be as you see the story unfold, and especially in an intro book, it's a little bit higher level. But the point is that we actually will sneak in the concepts just in the way that it's gone about or the way that it's explained, and it's more about emulating that mindset versus going and doing an explainer. I mean, it's a children's book after all. Really, we want to hook them and make it interesting enough so that they're actually looking, at a story, develop and unfold, something they can follow along with, kind of that strong illustrations that, makes them go, hey, what's that detail, or what's this sort of thing? I think that's kind of a powerful way that we can kind of deliver that message and help kids start thinking like engineers, right? So in a way, you could say that the rubber duck inspired part of the namesake and the problem-solving spirit of the book. All right, so let's get a little bit practical now. So why does this matter for us engineers, right? Why does this technique or knowing about it matter? Even though, part of the thesis of the whole show is this type of stuff. But anyways, let's break it down a little bit further, right? So we all know how isolating problem solving can get, right? Especially if you're the only one working on a particular issue, which is the case most of the time. You're not going to get to soundboard or, as a group work on, every single problem that you're doing. A lot of the time it's kind of just you. And so having a way to step back and explain the problem, even to something as simple as a rubber duck, can make all the difference. Now, you might compare this to nowadays. You go, oh, well, I can go and kind of have this conversation with AI, with a ChatGPT or something along those lines, which you can. Now, this is part of that, problem seeking. But sometimes if it's not really about a known problem, you're just kind of trying to work through possibilities, and it's through kind of something that you're, well entrenched in. So it's not about, general knowledge. It's about getting those brain circuits to connect. This is going the opposite direction, right? So instead of going to talk to something even more intelligent, you're going to try to talk to something or soundboard something off of something that's less intelligent, which has its advantages, is all I'm getting at. It's not saying, do one thing or do the other, but from a practical standpoint, you can do it and think of it that way. Like the whole goal isn't an agent that you're talking to. It's really something much, much more simplistic. So, yeah, like that's the point, right? Like if it's something as simple as a rubber duck, that can make the difference, that alone, right? And it's just a habit or thinking. You don't even need the physical duck there, although maybe I'll create some physical ducks that people can use. You could just go with the metaphorical. So anyways, but in addition to that, right, like using this method builds that habit of approaching problems calmly and methodically, right? You want to be that person in the room when something's going wrong, that you're kind of in control. Look, I'm just going to run through and explain exactly where I'm at and where I'm going to. It has this added advantage that when there's a supervisor or extended parts of the team kind of around the area or wanting to listen in or get an update, like you've got your thoughts worked through and explained. You're not just kind of like clutching at straws. Even if you might be, you seem poised and in control, at least of your approach to the problem, not the fact that the problem exists. So there's an advantage as well, just from the presentation of yourself and how you conduct yourself to solve problems. Now, if you are a parent or thinking of sharing engineering ideas with kids, usually, right, it's like, I'm your parent, like this is this boring thing I do. No, this is going to be a fun way to introduce them to how we solve problems and think of things. It's not like, hey, I'm dictating how you do this. Watch how this kind of unfolds in this cute little book. And it just keeps it light and accessible. All right, so this segment is going to be more like a question-based thing, like a listener questions type segment, where some of these questions have just come out and about from talking with people or talking about the book or the podcast in general. So let's just kind of reel through them. The first one is, how can we introduce engineering to kids without overwhelming them? So that's a great question, because you go, especially something like engineering or a thick topic, like how can we do that? I think the first thing is, it's all about that approach. I'm not telling you engineering. I'm not teaching you about engineering per se. It's more about introducing those mindsets and concepts in terms of things that they're already interested in right now. So for example, if they, are into plants or ask about a tree, then you can go through some engineering type thinking or topics around that thing they're interested in, or their toy, or the way the wheels spin, or if something breaks, we can fix it. How can we fix it? And you walk them through that kind of process and that thinking. So I think you can do it that way and not overwhelm them. I think it's worth mentioning that, hey, it's engineering, or casually talk about engineering. We've discussed this before when I've talked about my other kids' books, in that, it's like a nursery rhyme from when you're young. Like there's concepts in there that you didn't know it was about until you grew up, but you just kind of remember these things. I think when you casually mention it and make it sound like not a big scary thing, they don't treat it like a big scary thing. So that's one great way. Question 2, what's a good age to start teaching STEM concepts to children? So again, similar in the vein of the previous question, I think as early as possible. It's just the way that you do it. I'm not going to teach a math equation to a 5-year-old, but hey, the approach for why, if I want to have more of this thing, what can I do? Well, I can get another one. Like that's your addition, that you're introducing that sort of thing to them from the beginning. And even just the words, the familiarization with certain words. Maybe if they ask something, hey, well, you can just say, hey, let's do an experiment, right? Let's do an experiment to find out, even if you know the answer or it's a quick Google away, let's do an experiment. And they just naturally start thinking, let's do an experiment. You're already introducing STEM concepts to children. And as early of an age as you can, start speaking to them, I'd say. How did you approach balancing fun and education in the engineer's duck? I must say I over-indexed on the fun side, and the education side is more incidental, right? It's not, hey, stop, we're studying or learning right now. It's, you want to know about what Engineer Lon Lon's up to and what problems he's fixing and how he's helping. The big tenet of the book that I'm trying to hit on is curiosity and kindness, because I think, why should I learn something? All that stuff. If you're just naturally curious, you're gonna want to learn something. And if you want to learn something or find out an answer, you're gonna need a method or approach. It just all comes out naturally. And the kindness part is really how you work as a team, how you share, how you solve problems and help others with their problems and listen and all that sort of stuff. So curiosity and kindness are big parts of the book. And so that is probably what I based it on, versus thinking explicitly how much fun and education should be in here. No, education's already fun. it's really about how you present these ideas, and you make the characters compelling enough that, hey, I want to know more about them. You inspire that curiosity out of them. Much simpler. Question 4. How has the Rubber Duck method influenced your own work beyond the book? I talk about this all the time. And I mean, if you've listened to any of the podcast episodes, and actually if you've read my book, 10 plus 1 Steps to Problem Solving, I actually mentioned this method in there as part of one of the steps, or as one of the tools you can use to address one of the steps, the problem solving steps. So clearly it's influenced me in terms of that, but I would say you underestimate how much the language, the way your brain thinks in stories and narrative. And so you want to use that to your advantage. We know this through neuroscience studies that the brain does think in a more narrative style. And, that's one example of that. And what advice would you give parents who want to foster curiosity in engineering for their kids? I think it's exemplifying that curiosity in yourself. Every question that comes up, or, kids are at that age where they ask the simplest thing. Like my son literally asked me, what is a tree? And without pointing at a tree and saying, that's a tree, like, how do you explain that? Like, it's a giant plant. What's a plant? What's it like? And you go down this thing. So you should naturally be curious and try to find out answers. I think even the simplest questions are actually some of the hardest to answer, because more complex stuff, you can just say it's a version of that thing. You can use analogies to work with. Once you get to underneath that layer where there's less analogies, because you're trying to get to the source of the answer to a thing, and to be able to explain it to a 5-year-old, like that's infinitely harder, I'd say. But yeah, exemplify curiosity yourself. I think that would be the biggest thing. Last one, when is the book coming out? Where can I get updates? Look, I'm doing updates all over this Engineering IRL socials. I'm sharing so much behind the scenes. What you're watching now on screen is actually a time lapse, or a sped up recording of our illustrator working through all of these details. Every single detail we've gone through iterations and upgraded, evolve. It's a lot of care. There's a lot of Easter eggs in there. I'm gonna be breaking down, hey, on this page, this engineering meme, right? This is actually the inspiration for some of the artwork happening there, and things like that. Like that level of behind the scenes, you'll be able to find, here on YouTube or on TikTok or IG, like any of the socials where I'm posting stuff. There's going to be that type of thing. And then obviously with the website, you can go onto the website and find the Engineer's Duck and register or sign up for the launch or the email list. And that's the main content. Wow, this has been a while. I've truly missed this. I think podcasting has been a fun part of, what I've included in my process over the years. And look, I really need to continue doing that and come back to it, which, this is step 1, episode 50. I kind of lagged out because when I hit 49, I was like, okay, 50 is going to be a really special episode. I've got to up all this quality. And I added all these barriers technically. And really it's about the content. So it's just about, it was never about this high production thing from the beginning. You can listen to episode 1, 2, 3. And it was really about just get out there, get talking, explain concepts, learn, research, all that sort of stuff. Just let it come out naturally. And I've got to stick to that more. So which that will be the case moving forward. The positive thing is obviously I've got something here, which is the whole Engineer's Duck series, which has forced me to kind of come back to my roots in terms of this type of stuff. And so you should be hearing more from me. And I will endeavor to release a few more podcast episodes that I'll tie in a concept or an engineering thing as per the theme of this whole podcast, as well as give you the updates on how the book's going, because I think people will have an interest, at least from the project development. I apply actual project engineering type concepts into the development of this book, and this pivot to be more publishing business focused. So look, I really appreciate the joining in on this episode. I'm gonna wrap things up now. Okay, so first, let's go back through what we covered in the episode. So number 1 is the Rubber Duck method is a simple yet powerful tool in our engineering toolkit. So definitely have it on your kit. Okay, it's one of those methods that not only helps us, but it's also something we can easily pass on to inspire younger minds, our future engineers, even current, new upcoming engineers. And I would say this is not exclusively for software. You think about the problem solving process and what it takes. I don't care if you're, a civil or mechanical or a chemical engineer or whatever it is, a systems engineer especially, I think actually it's super, super effective for. But, and that might be by bias as being a systems engineer myself, I would say definitely it's applicable to all types of engineering. And for our non-engineers listening that are just curious about this topic, try it. It's actually surprisingly useful. Anyway, I'd also love for you all to check out the Engineer's Duck. Please, it would mean a whole lot to me. I think this book, it's not just fun for kids. It's a way to share some of the great problem-solving mindsets in a way that's fun and approachable. There's also a bunch of, like I said, Easter eggs and details in there that you go, actually, you know what? An engineer wrote this, right? This is a real engineering detail. This is not generic AI-generated stuff that you're seeing more and more on the shelves, or it's not like from a pure writer that's trying to enter this area or, make it fun. No, this is like, it's engineering first and then kind of built into the whole fun thing. So I'd be really curious to know people's feedbacks, especially those of you engineers out there that go like, okay, I can't believe you added that detail, or if you pick up those little things or not. That'd be super interesting to me. So anyways, if you're interested in picking it up or just want to sign up for the launch, which is between now when this episode launches, which is the 31st of October through to end of the year. I'm going to try and get it before Christmas, but we'll see. I don't want to make any promises there, but it's towards the end of the year or early next year. But really, I'm just trying to get as much of the feedback I can leading up to it, that, hey, this is something that's interesting to both engineers and what they would maybe want their children or family friends or whoever to have in their lives. I've had some kind of feedback on some of the previous engineering books that I kind of launched, and they're all positive. This time I'm taking it to a whole new level, right? That was back in 2019. I've learned and grown and done a lot more, and so this is where I'm putting all my effort, every lessons learned over the 6 years of publishing I've been doing, into just this book. So I really hope that it has the impact that I'm going for there. The link to all of it, it's going to be in the episode notes, so there should be links in there, and I'll really focus on just that link and not confuse things with a whole bunch of other stuff that we can share and show, but it's really about that. Thanks again for tuning in and celebrating the 50th episode with me, so really happy about that. And it's been a pleasure, and I'm excited to bring more of these ideas to life, both for engineers of today and tomorrow.